Hi again. John Wesley Bready, chapter 10 of this Freedom Whence, England before and after Wesley. And the chapter 10 is called The Spirit of Equity and Fellowship. Now he's dealing with dress, that is fashion, and station, that is your place in society as it was seen in the 18th century. Wesley was not a sociologist. As an ambassador of Christ, he did not conceive it his task to formulate economic, political, or social theories, nor did he judge himself competent so to do. His calling, he believed, far more sacred and thoroughgoing. It was to lead men into spiritual reality, to enable them to possess their souls and experience abundant life. For if once men in sufficient numbers were endowed with an enlightened conscience, they, collectively as well as individually, would become possessors of the wisdom that passeth knowledge. And in that wisdom, social problems gradually would be solved. Ultimately, therefore, the movement guided by Wesley became a far-reaching social leaven, for no sociologist has yet lived, with the exception of Marx, who has exercised such direct and intimate influence upon the social activities of great multitudes of men, and no sociologist, including Marx, has yet inspired such voluntary, creative sacrifice among his disciples. But though Wesley's purpose remained spiritual, and though he elaborated no comprehensive theory of social organization, never did he shirk the duty of striving to apply the Christian ethic to the pressing social problems that crossed his path. Had he not done so, he would have betrayed his trust. Dress, to Wesley, was an expression of the inward man. His own habit always was tidy, shapely, but severely plain and cheap. His linen was spotless, his shoes shined, no frill or flounce found place in his attire, and in an age of powdered, monstrous wigs, he was content with his natural hair. Yet from 100 sources it is clear that immaculateness and comeliness were outstanding marks of his person. Wesley's teachings on dress exhibit an interesting combination of his native conservatism and his radical religious convictions. Studying his writings, one quickly discovers the arch instance of his conservatism. It is the British kingship, ever to him the emblem of the people's corporate life. English royalty, to Wesley, was a divinely sanctioned institution. Hence, never do we find him criticizing the ruling sovereign. George II, though possessed of physical bravery, was a weak king, maintaining an immoral court. Yet, sagacious as Wesley in most matters was, he seems never to have suspected the sensual conditions surrounding that monarch's life. And more than once he applauds him as a just, generous prince. Thus, accepting this exalted view of kingship, as did most Englishmen of his age, Wesley does not condemn a high degree of grandeur in royal attire. Yet even as he states his case, his conscience is ill at ease. It is doubtful, he writes, if Scripture forbids those in any nation vested with supreme authority to be arrayed in gold and costly apparel, or to adorn their immediate attendants, magistrates, or officers with the same. But quickly forging on, he exclaims, "These Scriptures manifestly forbid ordinary Christians, those in the lower and middle ranks of life, to be adorned with gold or pearls or costly apparel." Gay, gaudy attire, Wesley taught, engenders pride, and where it already is, it increases it. It breeds and increases vanity. It begets anger and tends to create and inflame lust. Every shilling, he says, which you save from your own apparel, you may expend in clothing the naked and relieving the necessities of the poor. And everything about thee that costs more than Christian duty required thee to lay out is the blood of the poor. Then, pointing the tenor of his message, he asks, "Is not your dress as gay, as expensive as theirs, who never had such warning? Are you not as fashionably dressed as others of your rank that are not Methodists?" "But I can afford it," comes the reply. "Oh, lay aside that idle, nonsensical word. No Christian can afford to waste any part of the substance which God has entrusted to him. Let me see before I die," he pleads, "a Methodist congregation full as plain dressed as a Quaker congregation. Only be more consistent. Let your dress be cheap as well as plain. Otherwise you do but trifle with God and me and your own souls. I pray you, let there be no more costly silks among you, how grave soever they may be. Just here, to Southey, that is the poet Robert Southey, and his set, lay the rub. They were too refined to desire loud, foppish apparel. They wanted a habit rich, not gaudy, but always costly, as their purse could buy. To Wesley, by such indulgence, they were making themselves accountable for all the want, affliction, and distress, which they may but do not remove. Even the special privileges which Wesley waveringly conceded to royalty were not without limitations. 5 years before the death of George II, he was in the robe chamber to the House of Lords when the king put on his robes. The journal records his impression. Quote, his brow was much furrowed with age and quite clouded with care. And is this all the world can give even to a king? All the grandeur it can afford? A blanket of ermine round his shoulders, so heavy and cumbersome he can scarce move under it. A huge heap of borrowed hair, with a few plates of gold and glittering stones upon his head. Alas, what a bauble is human greatness. End of quote from the journal. Wesley's subconscious Toryism was the hangover of the natural man. His spiritual being revolted against all parading display. The fashionable dress of his period now seems preposterous. Certainly its more flamboyant styles achieved the grotesque. For periwig-pated males sported fringe, ruffles, and fluff, gold and silver lace and braid, silk satins and velvets of gaudy hues, colorful tassels, garters and bows, together with huge bejeweled buckles, and perhaps a dozen garish buttons, each the size of a small sunflower. The wardrobe of an 18th century fop cost hundreds of pounds, if paid for. Even Dr. Johnson, who declared that, quote, fine clothes are good only as they supply the want of other means of procuring respect, unquote. For his visit to Paris in 1755, Dr. Johnson spent £30 on a new suit and a bourgeois wig. Smart, feminine fashions rivaled those of male dandies. Women achieved incredible hairdressing and millinery, while hoops, bustles, open bosoms, and wasp waists, together with abundance of flashy jewelry, augmented the allurements and embellishments of their attire. Nevertheless, while the rich paraded their feathers and fripperies, exhibiting often their vulgarity no less than their pride, the hard-working poor eked out their existence in tatters and rags. No wonder, therefore, that Wesley emphasized the moral significance of dress. He despised all gaudiness. He would have every man, woman, and child clothed in raiment at once comfortable, modest, shapely, and clean. And to him such raiment was more comely than any daubed with gold. Next time, more on Wesley's social work.